One of my favorite quotes is that 80% of life is just about showing up, or 80% of success is just about showing up. A lot of people overanalyze things like business, investing, and other things. And the interesting thing is, I found that people who analyze more and sometimes have more knowledge don't always overachieve in a domain. Now, a few videos ago, I spoke about Warren Buffett's business partner, Charlie Munger. Now, the interesting thing is, Charlie Munger said on many occasions that he doesn't like employing exceptionally smart people, especially at the business school types, even though he knows they're actually smarter than he is. Why is that the case? He has a great quote where he says something like, it's unbelievable how much advantage we've had over the years not doing very stupid things as opposed to always trying to be very smart. That's kind of paraphrasing what he said. But it's interesting that very smart people don't always outperform. So for example, there was a hedge fund in the late 90s, which almost created a financial crisis, because it did get quite a lot of money into it. And it was started by PhDs, Nobel laureates or whatever, but it absolutely crashed and burned, even though in the first few years it did very well and it needed kind of a government bailout. And what I found is, when I look at people who are successful in investing, often the ones who don't know much about investing, they just put it in, they don't look at their valuations, they just keep it simple, they just think it's all about the long term, they invest every month or whatever. They often do far better than people who are trying to overanalyze. So I've noticed in my network, those people who are, for example, business school types who are always trying to think, they're always trying to think they're smart basically. And even people who are actually working at hedge funds or working in financial institutions, unless they actually keep to a very simple strategy, often they end up doing worse than people who are keeping it much more simple. I'll give you a perfect example of this. 6 or 7 years ago, and especially 3 or 4 years ago, so many of the finance people in my my circle said, European markets, especially British markets, look undervalued. The price to earnings ratios look really cheap, blah, blah, blah. American markets look very overvalued, so we're going to switch assets into the US markets. Now, I'm not saying what they were saying is untrue. The P/E ratios were lower for European markets. But what's happened since is that, European markets have continued to lag American markets. Now, that's not going to last forever. For the next 10 years, who knows? European markets, UK markets could absolutely skyrocket compared to US markets. Things like this do go in cycles. But a sensible person who has common sense would say that markets aren't always efficient, but they're also not stupid. If the UK markets look undervalued compared to US markets or European markets more generally, that's because there's more risk associated to them. The same thing when it comes to emerging markets. So that's just one simple example, but I found time and time again that people who are actually in the finance domain often don't make the best investors, because often they're trying to be too intelligent for their own good. So often people forget that the key things about investing are not how much knowledge you have, and people think it's all about going online, spending an hour researching. When people say, I'm going to research, what does that mean really? It just means they're procrastinating or whatever. Oftentimes, the people just keep it very simple and say, right, I'm going to get started, I'm going to invest, I'm going to invest every month, I'm going to do this for decades. Those people tend to do far better than the people who think they're too smart, the people who overanalyze, overthink things, or overcritical and so on. Because those kind of people, whenever there's any kind of crisis, like what happened in 2008 or 2020, whatever, they're much more likely to consume media, they're much more likely to speak to their fellow finance geeks or whatever, and they often come up with all these stories. March was a great example of that. When markets were down, many professional financial people said, we think markets are going to go down further, when they should have known better, that no one can really time the market. So I would say when it comes to investing, remember that pretty much 80% of your results are actually based on just showing up, just having your money investing sooner, getting things done sooner, then investing every month. The other 20% is important, things like asset allocation, all those kind of geeky finance things. Absolutely, they can be very important, but they're a minority. They're the 20%. The 80% is just getting something set up, keeping to a simple strategy, and doing that is much more likely to be profitable long term, as opposed to trying to be too smart for your own good.
Okay, everyone, I've got some really exciting news today. So for a couple of years now, many people have asked me, well, look, I can't afford your minimum investments, but I really like your advice. I don't know if you can do this or you can do that, or you can help me in that way, or you can't help me in that way. I've always said, no, I can only do this or that, but I've got some really exciting news, and that's that in a couple of months before the end of the year, I will be bringing out what I'm calling the Adam Fired Academy, which will have many new areas which will be of interest to people. So things like mentoring, tutoring, all those kind of things that people have asked me for in the past. So stay tuned. I'm going to be announcing it in the next few months, but I thought I would tell it to you guys before. Let me know if there's anything in particular that you're looking for in this academy. We're going to be focusing on many different areas, including how to invest productively, also some business areas, because that's another thing people have asked me about before. So stay tuned, and I'll keep you up to date.